Hi, everyone, and welcome to Aquarium Radio at aquariumradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Care Lessin, and today I'm here with Richard and Linda Smith, and they're the author of several books. And today we're going to talk about the love life. And let me pull up, let's see, I've got to pull up, hold on, got to update, pull up their website. So what is the love bite? It's an orchestrated extraterrestrial pairing between two targeted human beings. It is an extraterrestrial instigated staged relationship, which is through manipulation, emotional, and sexual bonding, often resulting in dramatic love obsession, in one or both partners. And most of the targeted humans have multiple abduction histories. They have had numerous encounters or UFO sightings. The relationship between the two bonded individuals is such that both are magnetically attracted to one another, often in unlikely situations. When they both meet in real life, there is an intense sense of recognition, and a couple may fall in love often in unlikely situations. And such is the case with Richard and Linda Smith. So when I was doing a little bit of research today and just going back through my memory lane, I think that I am in at least, I'm in a current love bite relationship, but I've been in several where I have recalled being involved with lovers that I met as children. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Smiths. The other phase of love bite is when Eagler and Pamela something or other, they were talking about how they were attracted to mate with extraterrestrials. That's another facet. The other facet is the hybrid children. Are they all connected in the lab, or are there any kind of relationships with the parents of these hybrid children that are part human, the extraterrestrial parents with the human? So we're going to talk about all these aspects in the next hour to hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And I'm going to pass it over to Richard and Linda. You two could take turns. Could you elaborate more to our listeners about this love bite phenomenon and how it occurred between the two of you? Oh, yeah, and also Majestic, Whitley Strieber's Communion, if anybody's read that. Oh, no, it's not Communion, Majestic by Whitley Strieber. That is a story about a love bite. So we have these love bite stories going back actually into antiquity. So go ahead and tell us about your love story and how you got bitten.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start it off here, and then Linda will take it over. But our story kind of begins at two different spots. One would be elsewhere, off-world, not in what we refer to as the real world, and that was during our childhood. And the other was in the real world when we actually met up with each other as adults when I was in my mid-20s, and that was about 22 years ago when we actually recognized each other here on the physical plane for the first time, so to speak. And that recognition was a powerful avalanche of emotions with respect to like, oh my God, I know her. But then again, there was the thought that came right after that, that was, I want to know her. I have to know her. I want this person in my life. Who is she? And I was, my socks were knocked off when I first met her because it was such a powerful recognition. And I say it that way because that includes the fact that it was a powerful feeling of attraction and that this was somebody I wanted to know, but also a powerful recognition that somehow I knew this person already. And this is when immediately after that, in the months and years that followed, that the memories came to the surface pretty much, I would say, within the first 6 months of who we were to each other. We started comparing notes and realizing, even to this day, 22 years later, that when Linda was about 12 years old, or 10, right? 10, yeah, about 10 years old, I had known her elsewhere aboard a spaceship, in an alien or extraterrestrial environment of sorts, when I was a very little boy. And I would have been about 3 or 4 years old, because we're about 6 or 7 years apart from each other. And so she, in that realization and that resurgence of total recall and memories, we realized that she was actually someone put in charge of taking care of a child like me. But then, during our childhood, as the years went on into adolescence and teenage years, we had become more so intimately bonded with each other, sexually bonded with each other. And that is putting the pieces together between ourselves over the years. That's where it really began for us, during our childhood, even though we didn't know it at the time. And this is something that overtly affected me over the past 20 years, because I spent the better part of my life, from an adolescent right on through to my mid-20s, when I finally met her that night at the art gallery for the first time in the real world. I spent a good portion of that time, being attracted to women who were of that same type, that same characteristic, that same look. And I couldn't understand why I had such a passionate obsession with being with a certain type of woman. It was the same thing across the board with any girlfriends in high school or college. Not that I had that many to talk about to begin with, but the ones I did have, they were all the same type. And
how do you think they do that? How do they get you imprinted with this, that you have this compulsion to, find a beloved that's of that certain type? What do you think they do? You know what? The hypnotherapist that we've worked with here in New Mexico, Gloria Hawker, somebody who, during the heyday of the 1980s and into the 90s, had worked with people like Bud Hopkins and Eve Lorgan and so forth. She kind of explained it to us how it goes. I don't know if it's the same application to Linda and I, but it makes sense for most people in a alien love bite scenario. You are, how did she describe it? Some kind of a chemical bonding, or in the sexual intercourse. Yeah, it seems like it would be more than just simple hypnosis. It's something that's really intense.
Yeah,
right.
It was definitely more than hypnosis. There was more of a biochemical influence. So
I would say when
chemistry.
I was under the influence of it, I felt like I was in heat. I don't know if you've ever seen a cat in heat. I felt like a cat in heat, and it was just so overwhelming. It took me over. It was all-encompassing. I was obsessed, possessed.
It was,
I couldn't think of anything else.
Definitely. That's what I was going through back in my mid-20s when I first recognized her. And then I couldn't stop wanting to be around her. I wanted to know her. I was genuinely interested. It wasn't just a superficial attraction for me. I wanted to just spend all my time with her and know everything about her. And it had become such a heated, driven desire that I joke about it now, but at the time I was actually thinking about, how do I get rid of her husband so I can be with her? It was kind of one of those things. So she was married at the time, and so that put a damper on everything. It kind of killed it.
Yes.
And that's the part that, in that time frame, first recognizing her, it made things extremely difficult at that point in time. Very difficult.
So how did you tell her that you were attracted to her in that way? What's that?
She more so stepped out of her comfort zone and came to me about it. And because I was kind of hemming and hawing as to whether or not I should say anything, I had already been friends with her mother through certain paranormal group that we were going to on a monthly basis. And that's, how I ended up meeting Linda, through her mother. But so there were certain factors that made me feel like there were too many barriers there. But then all of a sudden one day she called me on the phone and asked me, after a meeting one particular night that we had at her house, and she saw the way I looked at her on the way out the door that night, and that's when she called me that same week and said, hey, are you feeling the same way I'm feeling? And I said, yes. Yeah, because it was like, oh, Jesus Christ, finally she said something. So were you like looking at her a certain way? Were you sending vibes each way? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine. We were sending vibes to each other the whole time. As soon as we recognized each other that one day at the gallery opening and the solo exhibition, and that was it. So we couldn't stop thinking about each other. We couldn't stop looking at each other. We would be sneaking around,
Not sexually, but...
Not sexually, but just looking for places to make out here, there, and everywhere, so that nobody would see us.
Oh, well, I wasn't that good. I ended up having an affair. This is how it just possessed me. And it totally took me over. And he, too. We were like, oh, we love our partners. Yeah. What are we doing?
Right.
Yeah, it was obvious there was some kind of alien possession. Because looking back on it, especially, it was like, wow, that's not how I operated in the world. But there I was. Yeah.
There is a interesting extraterrestrial aspect to it. I know Eve Lorgan talks about it in her book. Gloria Hawker has told us about it, but I don't know if too many people realize it. I'm not canvassing everybody. It doesn't go for everyone, but in a lot of cases,
right.
There is the biochemical thing. In nature, Komodo dragons have the ability to nullify any kind of prey they bite into because they have a certain venom excreted from their jaw that once they bite into you, the venom gets into your bloodstream and just knocks you out and makes you docile.
Uh-huh.
Well, in a very similar aspect in the alien love bite process, there are certain people who have reported experiencing being bitten on the shoulder by a reptilian, which would, of course, initiate this biochemical, connection between the two male and female partners, and both people would get bitten by the same reptilian. So whatever that chemical interaction is, it seems to be coming from possibly a reptilian humanoid type entity, alien, that transmits this chemical influence through, once again, no pun intended, the quote-unquote love bite that you get on the shoulder by such a being, both the male and female, the boy and the girl. So there is that influence as well that kind of stamps it into place. Aside from any other procedures that they go through to, have that driving factor inside of you. Where is she? Who am I looking for? Why am I constantly going after this same type of woman over and over again until you actually find the real one that you were after in the first place?
So what do you think is the purpose of that? Do they want you to have children together? Why do they want certain people to get together?
A lot of it has to do with guaranteeing that certain family bloodlines on the planet are mating. So you have a control group and an experimental group. Okay, the experimental group is the controlled bloodlines, and I think in some cases it's being there are some aspects of it that are being done in a good sense, some not so good. But in our case, Linda can probably explain more about this better than I can. In our case, it resulted in hybrid twins, of which one of them I write quite a bit about in my books, is the one daughter who was allowed to stay here on Earth with us. I refer to her as J.M. Starchild in the books. And the other one was taken, not maliciously, but
and very early.
And very early too, at the time that Linda was pregnant with her daughter and her hybrid twin. The hybrid twin suddenly went missing during the pregnancy, and so it was.
So tell me what you mean by a hybrid twin. Were you pregnant with twins, or?
I was pregnant with twins, but the one that's the hybrid is the one that she looks more alien than human. I think she has more of the alien influence in her genetic makeup than the one I still have here. Although if you look at my daughter that's now 22, you can tell that there's something there with her. She's got very large eyes. Everybody who's ever seen her has noticed it. The one that they showed me that's the hybrid, they haven't shown me her in a very long time, but when they did show her to me and my mother, she had very, she almost looked like a chemo patient. She had a lot of missing hair. It was very thin, kind of blotchy patches, and she just stared at me. She didn't speak. She just stared at me. The alien that brought her to me spoke to me telepathically and told me everything.
And that one was known as the Elder, right?
That one's the Elder. That's the one I describe in my book as the Elder that's been with me since I was a child.
Mm-hmm. So they took her out of your womb and back to live with them.
Correct. I was about 12 weeks pregnant. And the only reason why I know this is because I started bleeding the morning after, and I went to my obstetrician. He did an exam, and then he brought me into his office, and he said, I have good news and I have bad news. What do you want first? And I said, just give me the bad news first. He said, well, I believe that you lost a twin, because before that, none of my sonograms had shown anything. But if you know anything about pregnancy, sometimes it doesn't show up right away.
Mm-hmm.
He said, the good news is you're still pregnant. And I just left there in a daze. I said, what do you mean I had twins? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until my daughter was about 3, she was talking to what I thought at first were her imaginary friends. And I asked her who she was talking to, and she said, my friends, Cadus and Betis. And then went on to list a whole bunch of others that she knows. and then she hit me with the last one and said, and KB is my sister.
Oh, wow.
And she hadn't known anything prior to that. She was only 3. So.
Right. Don't you love kids? They're so pure. Yeah. They'll just tell you like it is.
Yes.
Wow.
In February, about a month after I had my daughter, was when I had the experience of they brought me her twin for the very first time. And I wrote it in my book, so I'll just read it to you really quick. The elder told me, "This is your daughter. She will be kept here with us. You have been given permission to keep her sister on earth. They have been chosen for a very special mission. The girls will be carefully guarded and mentored throughout their lives. They must be raised separately because it will be safer for them. In due time, they will be called upon to work together. That is all you need to know now, but when the time is right, we will give you more information." And that was it.
That was it. Wow. So you haven't seen her since then, though? They haven't shown
I haven't seen her since the girls were about 3 that I can remember.
Right. And you have how many children that you gave birth to?
I gave birth to 3. I have one that's adopted, so I raised 4.
Okay.
And they're all adults now. They're the 2 oldest ones are in their 30s, and the 2 youngest ones are in their 20s.
However, on the flip side of that equation, Linda has also had experiences where she is in contact. She's around these alien hybrid children aboard a spaceship because she's trusted with them as their protector and teacher. And in those experiences, she's been looking for her other hybrid twin daughter ever since for the past 22 years. Hasn't found her yet, but there's no telling how many of these other hybrid children actually might belong to Linda and I. And you did have an experience recently where there was a child you were holding.
No, but I don't remember what it was.
You told me. Recently, Linda.
It's been the past month, no? I don't remember.
No, it's been in the last 2 months.
Mm.
Yeah. Recently, Linda had an experience where she was in a room with a group of hybrid children, and one of them was brought to her to hold in her arms. And it was, once again, it looked very much like what Linda remembered her hybrid daughter being all those years ago, 20 years ago. And the way this child looked up at her, it brought Linda to tears because she had this instant connection as if this was the first time she was being allowed to see her daughter after 22 years, her other lost daughter.
Right.
So,
wow.
So, in a sense, I think they are trying to keep their promise to Linda.
Mhm. Well, that's lovely. At least they're letting you see it. They let me see my son that I have with Sasha. And but I think they can take, like you said, they can make one, but they add DNA. They add different. I don't know how they do it. They insert other DNA, so they're not quite human. They're enhanced humans. They're like the next generation of humans.
Exactly.
And so and they probably have a lot of the 256 strands of DNA that's been shut off. They're on, So they're being raised in a different place because if you have somebody walking around with those abilities in the normal world, it could be dangerous. They could misuse them.
Exactly.
So they have to be carefully trained on how to manage their abilities, and hopefully they'll reactivating it within humanity. But we've got to get our act together before they do that. But we'll talk about all those possibilities in this and other shows. Yeah. Fascinating. So, so you have how many children do you have, Richard? How many birth on Earth, and then your hybrid children?
No, there's my brother and I, and between the two of us, he got all the kids. So I haven't had, other than what Linda and I know about our hybrid daughters, the one here and the one there, that's pretty much it that I know of. My brother is the one who has 4 girls, my nieces. So that's the extent of it there.
Okay, cool. So let's go back in time. So you've been going up on board ship. Let's start with Richard and then go to Linda and back and forth. What's your first remembrance of being on board ship?
Yeah, I think around, I know it's a funny way to say it, but I think it was around 4 years old that I came online, so to speak, with seeing things happen around me. Granted, it wasn't until the age of 21 that all these things flooded back to me as a total recall awakening for the first time. But in that recall, I realized the age of 21 really wasn't the first time, it was the age of 4. And 4, 5, 6, within that toddler age group there. And one of the first, I think the reason I remember it was because it had such a powerful emotional impact on me as a child, and I never forgot it. And that's when I remember seeing on board the spacecraft this girl with long dark hair, somewheres in her adolescence.
10, 11.
Later on, I confirmed it by looking at Linda's pictures as a child that was her, because she has pictures of herself from when she was 10, 11, and 12 years old, and I was like, oh my God, that's the girl, that's you. Mm-hmm. And that kind of blew me away because it was an exact depiction of the girl who was with me on the spaceship at that young age. The reason it had such a definitive impact on me, it left such an imprint, is because there was a certain point where I was holding her hand, we were walking together, and then all of a sudden I was being forcibly grabbed and dragged away from her. And I was holding on to her hands and screaming and yelling because in a panic because they were taking me away from her. And then something very weird happened, as if it wasn't weird enough, but something even weirder happened at that point. Linda talks about being in touch with the elder. I talk about being in touch with the crone. And they probably have a relationship with each other on the back end, more than likely. These things don't happen in an isolated manner. But at that point, at 4 years old, I, for the first time, flew into like this hyper rage that they were taking me away from her. And Linda had this look on her face of like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to him? Why are you taking him away from me? And the entity I refer to as the crone was there, and I wrestled myself away from whatever other being it was that was dragging me away. And the crone, the entity I refer to as the crone, had said, "You have to come this way now." And I said, "No." And she said, "Don't disobey me." And I said, "I want to go back with her." And she said, "No, not now. You have to come this way." And at this point, I could feel myself lighting up, almost like, my hands were turning on fire, for lack of a better explanation. And I actually pointed my hands at the crone in a rage at all of 4 years old, okay? And mind you, this entity is 12, 13 feet tall. And I was going to go at her. in anger. And he looked at me like, in a comical way, as if to say, really? You got some balls. Okay. And at the swipe of her hand, my hands went out. They just fizzled out, like she took it away from me. And then I was forced to go with her at that point. And she says, if you ever try that again, and she didn't finish that sentence, but I knew what she meant. So,
yeah. What do you think she would have done if you ever tried that again?
I don't know, but she's been a pretty harsh teacher through the years. Through my teenage years, through my 20s, through my 30s. She's been a really hard taskmaster. She hasn't, been easy on me about making sure I do certain things the right way. So, because as another story during that initial time frame aboard the spacecraft with Linda, one of the other things that happened with us is that there was a special meeting of some sort, very, very important meeting, commencing on the spacecraft in a secret room. And when I say room, that's kind of an understatement. It was huge.
Right.
Auditorium, circular. It was a circular shape. Linda has actually confirmed this from what she remembers too, because I remembered it, and she backed it up on that. She says, "Yeah, I have that in my mind too."
I ended up in that room.
And it was as an auditorium theater style. The seats, and there was a bazillion seats in there. They were all situated in a circular manner too. Okay, and the crone took me to these large doors that were pretty intimidating. They opened the door for her because she was allowed in as one of the attending members, but she turned to me and said, "You stay here. I have to go to this meeting. Don't touch anything." Emphasis on don't touch anything, right?
Right.
And I'll be right back. And so, excuse me, she goes into the meeting, and I happen to notice that, now I don't know if this was done on purpose or what, but the double doors hadn't been shut all the way. One was slammed shut, but the other one was left slightly ajar, so there was a crack between the two doors. And I saw when she walked in that there was this blue light, incandescent light of some sort, almost like the TV light, like if you were to leave a TV on, old TVs, not new TVs, but old TVs, that particular glow like you see in the movie Poltergeist, okay? But that kind of bluish glow was coming down on the auditorium attendees in the meeting, and I got a quick glimpse of it as a kid, and then I saw the blue light stayed on. Like, it was almost as if something or someone of an important nature was being beamed down into the middle of that auditorium to talk to everybody at once. That's what it was like. And so that's the kind of meeting that was. And you can fill in the gaps yourself there. But at that point, I'm standing outside, as kids will be. I was bored, okay? And the thing I was told, don't touch anything, kind of left my mind in 3 seconds. And I'm looking around, and I see this one other curious door. And I thought, oh, that's a back door to the auditorium. Maybe I can sneak in there. And I go and open it up. It was actually just a utility closet of some sort, all by itself, with a cylindrical, clear, semi-transparent device, almost like a capsule, a giant tubular capsule with all sorts of interesting contraptions on the inside that whatever the hell it did, I kind of got the impression that it was some kind of an energy device or a battery or something like that. And I was like, wow, that looks interesting. Wow. Because the components on the inside had, they were colorful, okay? They had color to them. So I went and put my hands on it, and all of a sudden the thing turned on. And then I knew I was in trouble because I couldn't stop it. I couldn't shut it off. And the thing started vibrating and bouncing out of the closet. Well, at that point, at 4 years old, I'm grabbing onto the thing now with my arms and legs wrapped around it, trying to get it to stop. The thing is bouncing around like this, fat pogo stick with me grabbing onto it, and I couldn't get it to stop. And then I knew I was screwed. I was so dead. As the thing stayed on, I guess it exponentially built up more power every time. So what happened was now in the corridor, every time outside the meeting hall, outside the auditorium, this was going on, every time it hit the floor, then it started punching holes into the floorboards of the ship. And it got more and more powerful. And it got so powerful that it was shooting holes through several layers of the ship, okay?
Oh,
and
goodness.
at that point, yeah, and I couldn't get it to stop. Now, at that point, the crone comes out, looks at me, shakes her head like she's got some kind of damn migraine from me now, and waves her hand over it, stops it, and floats it back into the closet and shuts the door with the mind telepathically, something like that, and looks at me like, what the hell did I just say? I said, don't touch anything. And I'm looking down through one of the holes in the floor now, okay, and it went down several levels, and at each level, there are, and you laugh about it here, as absurd as it was, there were other alien entities looking over the edge up through the hole at me as if to say, what the hell is that?
Dad, little boy.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. He hasn't changed. He still does that. You should see my house. Holes over the floor. Wow.
So yeah, that was the one was the emotional experience of being pulled away from Linda, and the other was the more comical one with knowing I was in deep shit at that point because I touched something I shouldn't have.
And did they do anything to you? They don't have punishment, right?
I remember the crone knocking me out somehow by touching my head, and that's all I remember. Because I guess that was the only way she could get me to.
I had to go back into that meeting.
She had to go back into the meeting, I think. Yeah.
No, she did.
Yeah.
Because that meeting was my initiation.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So, and that's why. So she just must have figured I'm going to knock your ass out so that you behave, and then went back to the meeting. So.
Well, she couldn't sit there and watch over you every moment. She had to do what she had to do. Wow. So what did the craft look like? Was this like I've been aboard many craft, and I don't always see the outside. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just find myself inside the craft. Yeah, so we don't know, but I've been at a place, and they used this on movie sets, but I've actually been going there since I was very young, very young, where it's all white. Everything's white, you know. And
we have been in one of those rooms, yes.
Yeah, the white room. And
yes.
So, okay, I lost track of where we were. So let's go back to. Yeah. Go ahead. You guys pick it up.
Go ahead.
So that was my first solid remembrance of
us being together.
Linda and I being together, being aboard the spacecraft, all that.
My first memory of us being together was I was about 10, and I had already been aboard with this group of aliens since I was about 3. And I remember picking him, I use this term so that people can understand, but it was almost like picking him up at the airport gate, and I was holding his hand walking down a hallway. And that particular date that he was talking about was my initiation into the sisterhood, but I was picking him up and I was walking him down the hallway when he decided, okay, they took her away from me, I'm going to be bad.
Yes.
But that same night,
you just dropped the term, the sisterhood. We need to understand what that is. What do you mean by the sisterhood?
The sisterhood, you explain that better.
Me? Okay.
Yes.
The sisterhood is it's kind of like it's a multiple alien species, human included, mostly made up of female. You'll find some male members in there, but mostly female. And they act as sort of for lack of a better term, they kind of act like a midwife between Earth and the galactic community. And their biggest focus is making sure, children, and both here on Earth or hybrid children who are being raised aboard spacecraft, and one of their main responsibilities is making sure those children are protected. In a lot of cases, it's gifted children, gifted kids, indigos, or hybrids or starborns, who, when they're first born and in their infancy and toddler ages and adolescence, they are extremely vulnerable to other elements out there that have more selfish purposes in mind for hunting these kids down. And the sisterhood steps in and stops that, protects them, and makes damn sure that there's no negative influence. So that's the entity I refer to as the crone is part of that. She's a member of it. She's very much, in a sense, can be understood as almost like the matriarchal leader of it, but they don't use terms like leader like the way we do.
Because we all have a say.
Yeah, they all have a say. It's more like a supreme advisor, all right? Because she's much like a female praying mantis type, the ancient healers, and there aren't too many of them left out there because of how old they are in the galactic community. But there's many different races, many different species involved with the sisterhood, some of them younger, some of them older, some of them are just coming into it, some of them are veterans who have been around for a long time. And this is something that favors what I refer to as the virile power, or the female principle, or the feminine goddess energy. And it's filtered down here on Earth in a big way with the influence of the sisterhood into our society. I mean, people like, by example, Harriet Tubman or Mary Magdalene or Joan of Arc, okay? Political leaders, anyone from like Angela Merkel to Maxine Waters to, all these different powerful political women, Indira Gandhi, okay? And they get their strength from this because these are the kind of women that you wouldn't want to piss off and then meet up with in a back alley because, that's how strong-willed they are as political leaders. But this all comes from that. And in a big way, the sisterhood symbolizes a sea change in our society. Because right now, we are experiencing a whole lot of problems with what's referred to as the culture of rape. We have a president in the White House. Culture of rape.
Say that again.
R-A-P-E.
Oh, the culture of rape. Yeah.
And, we have a president right now who thinks very little of women, and that's putting it mildly. But, that's just representative of a dying breed. As that old phrase goes, a baby screams the loudest before it goes to sleep. And that's what's happening with the old guard. It's screaming very loud right now and making big waves because it knows it's done, it's over with, and the female principle of the sisterhood is taking over. So this is a positive thing. This is a wonderful thing. This is the direction that we should have stayed, or the path we should have stayed on long ago, because that's where we started out before all this negative influence, started targeting children, domestic violence, all this bad stuff that kind of destroyed the original clan mothers of the planet who took their mandates from the sisterhood and the real power. And it is that female principle, that vril power, that actually serves as the backbone of yet another form of gifted children that we refer to from ancient history as the Christ child. So you got the indigos, you got the Christ children, the super psychic kids. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. There's no difference between any of them. But we just use different terms for them these days.
Right. So where's this going? So they're out there and they're doing their thing and they're supporting us. Is there going to be intervention? Or are they going to actually come out from behind the scenes, and is there a point when they say, no, we're not going to let this happen anymore?
Okay. There is, you bring up a good question there. That's an answer that can go in about 57 directions, but I'll keep it down to just one, okay? There's a thing that rests at our doorstep as human beings, and that's something I refer to as 50% of the blame, okay? Because here on this planet, we love playing the blame game because it relinquishes us from any responsibility to ourselves, our neighbors, our family, our friends, our planet, or society. If there's always a devil to blame, then nothing's ever going to get accomplished, all right? Even down to the fact that, if there's a piece of garbage in the street, you look at it, you walk by it, you think the other guy's going to pick it up. Well, I'm not that kind of person. I go out and pick it up myself, okay? I don't wait for somebody else to do it for me. It's where I live. I'm not the type of person who likes having, garbage and whatever all over the place, okay? I don't wait for sanitation to come and clean it up. And people find that weird, but that's called taking responsibility. So in the bigger sense, we have a problem on this planet where we have been so horridly sucker punched, and we've been emotionally damaged and psychologically raped by the more selfish and negative corporate forces on this planet who take their marching orders from the opposing team, that we've gotten into this negative grind here. Not that I have a problem with that. I'm a realist myself. I don't deny any of this. I see the glass full, half full. I see the glass is half empty. I see both sides of it. But the thing is that we've come to a point where we've reached a state of critical mass in the blame game, and it's now spilled out into all manner of ecological disasters that we have to accept 50% of the blame from, okay? Political disasters, crimes against humanity, war crimes galore, to the point where now we have to take stock of ourselves, take a good look in the mirror, and realize, you know what? I caused part of this. I caused a big part of it, and therefore I am 50% to blame. And until we're willing to accept 50% of the blame, okay, knowing full well that, yes, the bad guys are getting away with murder, okay, fine. They deserve the other 50%, but who let them get away with that 50% of the blame? We did. Okay, we turned a blind eye to it. We didn't take proactive action on our planet, in our society, in our homes, in our neighborhoods, okay, with our economics and our political system. We didn't take the initiative to change things systemically in the system so that women stop getting shit on and children stop being molested, okay? This is all systemic. This is not something that happens by accident.
If you could redo that, because I'm a child of the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? And it was epidemic. It was epidemic in my neighborhood, but it was just not talked about. And it happened, and then later on I became a therapist, and people ended up on my couch, and I ended up on a therapist's couch to process all this crap that had happened in my childhood. And so looking back at it, if I had a magic time machine, I could go back and redo it. I'm not sure exactly what to do, but we do have an opportunity in a way to redo it now, and that's what I see with the Me Too movement. But with the Me Too movement, it's kind of one-sided. It's like, okay, the victims are stepping up, but the people who were victimizers were victims when they were children, a lot of them. It goes full circle. Those who are abused, and they find themselves almost like the love bite, doing things and acting out from impulses because there's this huge wound inside their psyche and their soul. And so it's multi-generational dysfunction. And we do need to say no and stop the insanity. And we need to do the alternative program in our psyche if we just do it even via psychodrama, imagining it. And somehow we need to forgive everybody, but protect the innocent from further harm. And so I've played with would we take these people and imprison them? Well, punishment doesn't really work. What about rehabilitation? Can we isolate them on different colonies based on their crimes? Here's the whatever, the murderers, the rapists. What are some of your ideas?
I would say there are some people who probably can't help it. Yeah, they need help. And the psychological damage that's done on both sides of the equations isn't going to be fixed overnight. You're looking at least a 50-year cycle to weed all this crap out, okay? At least 50 years. But we could do it. And the next 5 decades will go by in the blink of an eye. I mean, I was born in 1970. It's already the year 2018. I don't know how I got here so fast, but I blinked my eyes, and here I am, 47 years old. And I don't know what happens in the next 40 years. So the thing is that time goes by very fast when you start making progress. One of the systemic changes that has to happen, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about this, so I hope everybody's listening, is that we need to put everything back into the hands of the way it was supposed to be. The same way that the Iroquois nation did. There was no man in the Iroquois nation who was allowed to make a decision until the female elders passed a decree. And then the male elders could put in their input as secondary advisors. Secondary, okay? Think about that. Mm-hmm. The power of judicial legislation and political decision-making has to be put back into the hands of women directly, okay? Doesn't mean men can't participate, but men simply have to get the hell out of the way at this point to let the soul of humanity, let's say, heal itself and get things back on track like the way it was supposed to be, the way it originally was. when things were balanced. Whether it's the Iroquois nation or the Egyptian dynasties, everything was balanced. It doesn't mean, there weren't bizarre anomalies like slavery, but that was an economic decision. That wasn't racism, okay? Slavery and racism are not the same thing. Slavery is economics, and in many cases, the slaves agreed to it anyway because they knew their masters would take care of them. Whereas racism is vicious abuse, sexism is vicious degradation, okay? And a matriarchy is not about sexism. A matriarchy is about equality, but once again, someone has to be the supreme advisor, and it's always the women, the female elders, who are the supreme litigators, the supreme advisors.
So what got us off course? What got us off track?
What knocked us off course was the fact that ultimately when the negative elements started coming into this solar system, they looked at it as nothing more than a giant chunk of real estate to own and manipulate. And this rubbed up against the spiritual enlightenment that existed at the time with the real power and the female energy, the female principle, and the clan mothers who were in charge of making the decisions before any man was even allowed to open his mouth and say anything, okay? That was seen as a threat because the corporate elements that came into this solar system, they didn't like that spiritual element. They didn't like the real power because it was the thing that was backing the Christ energy, okay? The orgone energy, okay? And they didn't appreciate that at all because it gave our ancestors, be they primate or ancient or prehistoric, the impetus to stay awake, stay aware, realize what was right from wrong, and stand up to these corporate oppressors who did not belong here in the first place. We seem to think that a stock market is something we invented. That's the farthest thing from the truth. The stock market came from elsewhere. The very concept of a long-standing corporation that has endless longevity is also something very alien too. Okay, that's not supposed to exist, right? And so once these elements were introduced, they were more so patriarchal because they looked at the male side of the species and figured, that's the more malleable half, the dumber half, the half that's easier to brainwash and manipulate, because that's the half that we can control with the ego. Can't do that so well with women. Women have egos, but not nearly as much as men do, okay? And so that's what they targeted. They targeted the weaker half of the species and created division. So
you're saying the real, how do you spell that? And can you describe that term? V-R-I-L. It's where the word will comes from, and that's how we got the phrase willpower. Power. Is that the same as the vril that was part of the Nazi Germany thing? Can you explain what you mean by vril and how you're using it? Vril is a female principle. When the Nazis got their hands on it, they bastardized it and just turned it into a cesspool. They also commoditized it and tried to make it sellable in the form of, your own spaceship program. Because in its truest form, the real power is the ability to move mountains with your mind. And that's what a group of women who get together are capable of doing, or at least they were 500,000 years ago, okay? And they can still do it today if they stop doubting themselves. But we've done such a great job of diminishing a woman and forcing her to look through a glass ceiling in, of all places, enemy territory known as corporate America, that she's lost her power. She sees herself as a lackey for a an old aging CEO. Okay, she doesn't see herself as a powerful female individual who has the ability to move mountains. So
this is where we get the whole concept of women living together, having their menstrual cycles become in sync with each other. Well, there's a reason for that, because in ancient times, that menstrual cycle, for which the root word is mens, M-E-S-E, that's an ancient word for mind. That's where we get the word mind from, the psychic mind and the psychological.
Mensa.
Okay. Yeah. Mensa, mens, menstruation, minstrel, monster. That's where all these words came from. The thinking beast is the mens, and henceforth a threat to the system. So mens became menster or monster, and this is how man became legally late. Yeah, we became a threat to the system, so we became the menster or the monster. The minstrel, same thing. The minstrel is the one who musically conveys the real power through passages and stanzas on behalf of the Mary Magdalene bloodline. And they did it secretly, using musical stanzas and coded phrases in their lyrics, so that they didn't have their heads separated from their shoulders at the time when things like that were forbidden. So minstrel, monster, mens, menstruation, these words are all tied at the hip. They all mean the same thing. And for women in particular, when they went through the menstruation process together in sync, okay,
It was powerful.
it was powerful. It became the very essence of the real power, which, of course, Hitler tried to dumb down and translate into UFO technology. Okay? But this is the kind of stuff that was used to build pyramids from the top down, not the ground up. There's not one historian out there who isn't left scratching their head wondering, how in flaming hell do you build a pyramid from the top down? Okay? So, and then when you go look at all the geographical secrets that they don't talk about on the Discovery Channel on the Giza Plateau, and all of the smelting pits that they had outside of Giza, you start putting the pieces together and realizing this was a matriarchal society that used the power of the drill and put women first. And that changed along the way when the more negative corporate elements invaded the solar system, invaded Mother Earth, and started decimating the Egyptian Empire. And, you know, by the time you come to the Middle Kingdom, you have a sabotaged legacy, a sabotaged high priesthood that basically labeled everyone from Isis to Nefertiti as a threat to the system.
So where's your source of this information?
A lot of this comes straight out of real history. You see this coming about over the last 5 years now. People are finding this information from sources who 20 years ago were too damn afraid to come out of the woodwork. But for me, over the past 20 years, it's come from my experiences with the crone, my experiences with the sisterhood, also my here and now on planet Earth, my experiences with real esoteric teachers who would fill in the gaps with me along the way when they would hear me speak. So it's happened on both sides of the equation for me. But nowadays, I'm happy to say that there's plenty of other places to track information down. And that's a good thing. That's awesome. That represents, once again, that sea change in our society with all these secrets now coming out. Esoteric historians, occult historians are now feeling safer talking about this. And a lot of that source of information is going to come from these elders in Egypt or Libya or Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, okay? You know, the northern part of Africa, the Middle East, you start seeing all these dirty secrets come to the surface from our history of human origins and where the power really lied at that point. It also comes out with Native Americans here, the Hopis, the Iroquois, the Montaukes, the Lenni Lenape. They all know this stuff too, because the Lenni Lenape are the inheritors of the pharaonic bloodline of Egypt. They actually came over here, and then a certain segment of them moved up north to the Algonquins and became the Montaukes. So the Montaukes of New York and the Lenni Lenape of Delaware are the ones who inherited the term pharaoh directly from Egypt.
Interesting. So, have you ever talked to Eagleheart? Eagleheart.
I know
like
who
Eagleheart.
that is. Yeah, I know who that is,
you're
but
converging on the same information.
Yeah, it would be an interesting conversation. I would love to talk with Eagleheart, but no, I've never crossed paths with that person.
Well, we will make it so. I like to do that. We'll make it so. Yeah. So, okay, we haven't heard from your better half for a while. Let's pass it back to Linda.
Yes.
What would you like to contribute to this conversation?
A little known
what would you like to
that
say?
Nobody really knows.
Okay.
That particular night that Rick was taken away from me for my initiation, and they put him aside. That night, I was also told that I would be assigned to him, and I was to protect him at all costs.
Okay, you were assigned to him.
Yes. Since he was very young.
So what does that mean? What did you have to do to protect him? What were you protecting him from? Sorry, I've got a 20-year-old cat that always goes.
My main role with the sisterhood has been like a nanny, a babysitter, a caretaker of the children that are on board. For most of my life, starting from when I was about 10 or 11. And where was I going? I lost my train of thought. Oh, my God.
As to why you're assigned to me.
That happens to all of us.
Sorry, it's my age. Woo! Take over because I had lost it completely.
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead. Back to you.
Go on.
I knew you were going in a certain
That's
direction.
okay.
Yes. I can't tell you why.
I don't remember who I am. Yeah, that happens.
Linda and I have been together quite a bit on extraterrestrial experiences, and a lot of it has been watched over by the crone. A lot of it, for Linda, it's been the elder. Okay, it's interesting. The symbol or emblem that Linda describes the elders as having is very similar to
a tetrahedron.
A tetrahedron, right? Okay, and so there's that kind of energy or influence that's involved with it too there. But we feel that we're here to teach the next generation what they're up against, and to teach them that the glass is half full, and not to ignore the half that's empty, because that's how you do yourself in, but to focus on the glass is half full, because at that point you're taking responsibility, and that's the first step towards waking up as a society. And this, I think, goes back to your original question, what would they do? Intercede? Are we going to see contact? Well,
we will. Yeah.
When people often talk loosely about this thing from Gene Roddenberry called the Prime Directive. And yes, I'm a firm believer in that too. I think that's a reality that we live in as far as extraterrestrial contact goes. But the Prime Directive argument only works if you're caught red-handed committing the crime in the first place of interfering with a lesser species or a more ignorant species like humans here on Earth. If it goes back to the old phrase, cop didn't see it, I didn't do it. Okay? Mm-hmm. If you don't know what the bad guys are doing, then you don't know what they're getting away with. And therefore, you can't take responsibility for something you don't know about. That's called being selectively ignorant, naive, sticking your head in the sand. That doesn't help anything. Okay? If you're going to take the bull by the horns, you got to be willing to go after the good, the bad, and the ugly, no matter what. That means people have to grow stronger in their self-confidence, grow a backbone, and stop making excuses for their own mental and emotional weakness, which is how the bad guys get away with murder anyway. Because for the most part, the human being is a good-natured entity. I don't get into the whole Freudian view that the human being is a dirty, disgusting, vice-ridden thing, because the one thing that Freudian analysis missed out on is you have to teach hate, you don't have to teach love, okay? So if we have to learn how to hate each other, then the logical question is, who taught it to us? And you can't go pointing fingers at the parents, because then the question is, like you said, generation after generation, who taught it to your parents? Who taught it to your grandparents? Who taught it to your great-grandparents?
Right.
Where did it come from? Requires, exactly. If it requires systemic change in our political and economic system, then it also requires an understanding that it's got to be a systemic change in our family, too. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, you have to admit, okay, yeah, some of us have had pretty ugly childhoods, but if you're willing to create a new beginning, a new reality, step up to the plate and realize, okay, my parents, with all their flaws, did the absolute best they could. The parents, the people who are becoming parents today, they think they're doing well. 20 years from now, they're going to realize they were completely wrong too, okay? And you just got to come to terms with that mom and dad didn't have all the answers, and neither did grandma or grandpa, okay? They did the best they could with what they were taught, and the generation before them wasn't too smart to begin with anyway. So when you're willing to follow Harry Truman's philosophy of the buck stops here, that's when things start to change. And we haven't gotten to that yet. We're getting close, but we haven't gotten to that yet. We're still blaming Barack Obama for everything and putting Donald Trump up on a pedestal, okay? We're still blaming Hillary Clinton for everything, but we think that bimbo from Alaska would have made a good president, okay? We're still looking for devils to blame. We're still looking for God to give us an excuse to do awful things. And we're still blaming the aliens. Oh, the aliens made me do it. Really? Okay. So, if what you're really saying is you're weak-minded, and therefore you're a liability to the rest of us. Because if it's that easy to manipulate you with gods and demons and aliens, then you're no good to the rest of us. So what does that make you as a human being? And I think when people ask themselves that honest question, that's when they start to take their power back and realize, I'm not a stooge, I'm not a patsy, I'm not a stool pigeon, I'm a human being, I'm a representative of the human race, I'm a representative of Mother Earth, and I better step up my game and get my shit together and start acting like someone who deserves alien contact, deserves to be a member of the galactic community. And we haven't earned that yet. We haven't earned that.
Well, I think some have, because look at you. So it's happening. So if it happens for one, it could happen for all of us. That's what we need, these people to come out and say, yes, this is the way we do this.
That's the gradual change. But, let's face it. It's, I think realistically, people like us are still in the minority. So,
right.
But then again, I also believe in the 100th monkey syndrome of critical mass. Where all of a sudden one day everybody's on the same page and blammo, we're at that spot where we're all part of the same game plan and realizing, that it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's okay to embrace it. And not only that, but it's okay to realize that it was always ours in the first place. We have this strange notion, we have this bizarre notion that human beings are down here on Earth and the aliens are up there, and ancient history is ancient history and modern history has nothing to do with ancient history. We have all these identification divisions in our mind of how we identify ourselves. We have all these divisions, and when we finally put all those things together as one unified focus of lost knowledge and ancient wisdom, then we realize how we got here. And by realizing how we got here, wherever here is, as far as where we are currently in our society, then we start realizing that our legacy is starborn, okay? And what's out there was already down here. So conversely, what's down here has a right to what's out there. And that's what I mean when I say it was ours in the first place, but it was taken away from us. And ever since then, we have allowed ourselves to be dumbed down and stunted in our education, our knowledge, our wisdom. We go ooh and ah at the newest things coming out from DARPA or the military, but we fail to comprehend that is child's play compared to where we were 500,000 years ago.
Right.
So, and that's our legacy that we have to get back to and take ownership of it and say, that was ours. That belonged to us, and you guys took it away from us. And once we realize that, we can say, okay, fine. Bad guys are going to be bad guys. Can't change them. Nothing's going to change them because they already sold their soul to the highest bidder. So forget about them. They're not going to come and save the day. They're not going to change. They're not going to suddenly grow a soul and feel sorry for themselves because, look at half the people they stuck in Spandau prison after World War II. Did any of those Nazis actually feel sorry? No. Okay. They sat in there. They made all sorts of excuses as to being political prisoners and persecuted and all that. So they're not going to change. They've already made their peace with the devil, so to speak. So we have to change. And that's where the change has to lie. And that's what's called systemic change in our politics, in our economics, and in our community.
So I love your words. So let's see if we can actualize this. I notice myself and other people, it's kind of like a should. We should change. We have to. But how? This is the big thing that's elusive. What can be said or done that twists that, kind of like that 100th monkey, within each person individually and collectively, so they actualize and they put it into action? Go ahead.
Yeah. I can give you examples from my own experiences. Not that they're going to apply to everybody. First of all, as far as everyone goes, my biggest number one suggestion is everybody should read the books published by Tom Hartman, okay? His books have solid, proactive, down-to-earth socially oriented, human oriented solutions, real solutions that can be implemented and help us change our way in the 21st century within a 50-year window. Okay.
What was his name again? Say that one more time. His name is
Tom Hartman.
Tom Hartman. It's spelled Thom. And his last name is Hartmann. I think he has two N's at the end of his name.
Okay.
Tom Hartman.
I'll look him up.
Any of the more recent books written by him, I strongly recommend everybody read them. Okay. Good stuff to read. Solution oriented. Okay. And so, instead of reinventing the wheel, I'm just going to tell everybody, read his book. Now, as far as my own experiences go with proactive change, I've seen and lived through, as you have, as Linda has, through some key decades for the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century to see the change take place just within the last 22 years. Okay? I remember, I was in the 80s when it was verboten to, talk about any of this stuff. I mean, and we're not just talking about UFOs here, but God forbid you mentioned the word occult. That was automatically slandered as the work of the devil. Nowadays, we know better and realize that words like devil and Satan have no linguistic or etymological meaning whatsoever. They had no foundation. And slandering the occult in such a manner was just a means of destroying the Egyptian legacy, the Sumerian legacy, the Hindu legacy, the Chinese legacy, and destroying any form of credibility to ancient knowledge or lost wisdom that would have helped us through these trying times. Okay, so now we know the word occult is a good thing. Okay, so there's that kind of a sea change happening there in our realization. Some of these changes are going to depend on not just psychological and emotional changes in our everyday thoughts, but and perceptions, but also technological changes. To this day, I tell everybody, do you really think here in the year 2017, 2018, that we're supposed to still be on fossil fuels in the 21st century? It's almost a joke to watch, Buck Rogers or the Jetsons or anything, because you feel like a complete goddamn failure watching these, future-related shows that pretty much dictated where we should have been in the 21st century already. And so why did that not happen? Why don't we have the flying car? Why don't we have better forms of energy? Well, the truth of the matter is, we had a president who was going to do that. His name was President Jimmy Carter, okay? And during his administration, knowing full well that we were going through an energy crisis that affected New York in a big way at the time, but everybody else as well, he had the foresight and the vision to realize that this whole fossil fuel garbage was not going to work over the next 20 to 30 years into the 21st century. It just wasn't. So he had the foresight to initiate proactive solar energy programs and actually had the government put aside and fund these brand new solar companies at the time in the 1970s, okay, during his administration. And they were going headlong with this. This is a reality that most people don't even remember, don't even know. Jimmy Carter was the solar-powered president, okay? He had the program going. These solar companies were being subsidized and funded by the government to get the whole industry going in a forward motion. And people were already getting into installing solar panels on their house in the 70s.
So who
not something that
hijacked
most
our
Americans
reality
do.
into this current paradigm where, they don't even believe in global warming or that there's any kind of problems here on this planet, that everything's hunky-dory. And it seems to me, it just seems so obvious that they're terraforming the planet and somebody has a different criteria for life, beyond, or different than humanoid life. We have, a certain range, and we're dead.
Yeah.
And they're changing this environment, and we're going to be gone by 2050 to 2100. We keep going this way. There will be no food. We'll starve to death, yes. So who's terraforming? Who's doing this?
Okay. A lot of that is happening because we're just, as far as looking at it from that perspective, we are seen as nothing more than cheap, replaceable slave labor.
Right.
And there's nothing better than creating an indigenous slave as opposed to importing them from a different solar system. That doesn't work. And so, that's I think that goes back to a lot of people's arguments of what's the purpose of a social security number or birth certificate. It's a number, it's a label, it can be replaced. Okay. And so that kind of cheapens the human condition right off the bat and creates that form of systemic problem of seeing the human being as, something that's just a cog in the wheel, insignificant and replaceable, when it's anything but that. And if that is the way that our industries and our systems on this planet are, brainwashed themselves to see the average human being, then the average human being is going to act like that, because that's the way, you kick a dog enough times, eventually the dog is going to become nasty and ungrateful and abusive and vicious and turn on you. So this is where we stand now, where we have these institutions, corporations and whatnot, that are raised on the principle that the human being is nothing more than cheap slave labor and therefore replaceable. We are not important. And if we're not important, then we can move forward, serve our masters elsewhere. And that's the other problem, too. There's a complete lack of loyalty to Mother Earth. There's no loyalty here. It's just a profit religion, okay? And once we destroyed that Native American concept of loyalty to Mother Earth first, okay, once that was removed, then it paved the way for people not giving a damn about whatever environment they live in. I mean, we have a situation where to this day, ever since the 1980s, right on up to now this year, you've got people living in neighborhoods where, they're living in the backyard of oil conglomerates or a nuclear power plant that's falling apart and leaking. And either they're stuck economically and they can't go anywhere or can't do anything, or they've resorted to brainwashing themselves with all sorts of excuses as to why it's okay to live there. And this is what now we're doing it to ourselves. We're degrading ourselves. We're making excuses for our own lousy ghetto environment that, we're all being turned into in a society that has become more and more separated between the ultra rich haves versus the rest of us who are the have-nots. That's got to change as well, because the, sad to say, the ultra rich are in for a sad awakening, because they've also been brainwashed to believe that they are the preferred ones. They're the ones that are going to be taken care of when the rest of us are, all but dying from terraforming or polluting the planet or destroying the environment. They actually think that they're in a prime position to be saved. And little do they realize
they have a ticket to go off planet, but off planet isn't all that great. I mean, who wants to go to Mars? It's not like Earth. It's going to be back to the Dark Ages, and you have the infrastructure set up there.
Yeah, in that scenario, let's pretend the ultra-rich were taken off the planet and brought to Mars or something like that. Well, now who's the bottom piece? Okay? So, somebody's going to have to do the slave labor. And then,
so Zuckerberg and all you guys, you Gates, you better, Elon Musk, pay attention, because this isn't so desirable where you're going to. There's already a caste class of extraterrestrial humanoids that are in control out there, and you're just going to be one of the. It's going to be the joke's on you, because you're just going to be. Here, pick up my shoes and polish them. Trump will be polishing shoes. Oh, I thought it was so important. I was so important. Now look at me. Well, actually, the older ones, they'll just get rid of them. They won't even, if you're over 50 or something, they'll just be gone.
It'll be another Logan's Run scenario. Anybody over 50 is terminated. So.
Yeah. So.
I know that sounds good.
I'm already over 50.
I'm turning 64. I'm turning 64 in like 3 weeks. So, in their value system, I'm not worth anything. But we're running out of time. We can go there. Because. We start talking in the one level where it seems logical, like you were saying that Jimmy Carter had this. We were going in another future. I was a functioning adult and knew what was going on, and I could see the future from that reality in 77, 78, or whatever that was. And it was not this one. It was not this one at all. So somehow our timeline got hijacked, our reality got hijacked, and we can play victim all we want, but somehow we were so apathetic and unconscious and not paying attention to the signs that we allowed it to happen, individually and collectively. So we can only do ourselves to a degree and turn that around on a spiritual level, and then we can do what we can to influence the next one. There is a critical mass tipping point, but we have to wake up. And realize, and so many people, like my own family, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't understand, you don't believe it, or you believe what you believe. It's like, whoa, we're in trouble if you just look at that perspective. So let's wrap this up. And what are some positive things? Let's do a closing round. And my husband's clunking dishes, so I'm going to let him make dinner. So let's start with Linda. Go ahead, Linda. Find your tongue. Find your voice.
Positive things.
Come on.
Positive things about what?
Give us something positive. Anything. Just give us a positive thought. We just went down into the depths.
Oh, yeah, no.
So let's come out of it a little bit something. So we end on a high note.
Yes, no. Positive things. I definitely believe that the majority of the extraterrestrial encounters that we have out there are positive. I don't think they're all doom and gloom, as he likes to bring everything into.
This was not doom and gloom.
Yes,
this
it was
educational.
It was educational doom and gloom.
No, it's great. It's great. I enjoyed going there. It's nice to see a Stephen King movie once in a while. Go ahead.
I think that the love bite scenario has definitely been a positive thing for both of us. There's no, I've never felt love like I have with him. And I definitely think it is meant for us to be together, because a lot of positive things have been coming to us ever since we got back together last year.
Yes, definitely.
Yay. I mean, I love it. I love a happy ending to a love story, especially one that started when you were so young, being introduced to each other on board a ship. Which I don't know if you remember. No, you're not as old as I am. The psychic for Nixon, I think it was. She said that children were being taken on board the ship and paired up. That was back in the 60s.
Wow.
Well, I was born in the 60s, so I remember Nixon, watching him resign, so I am old enough for that. I was born in the 60s.
So I was walking to school, and I had one of those little transistor radios, and I was probably listening to, like, the top 40, the Beatles and Rolling Stones and all that stuff. And suddenly they had this news announcement, Jean Dixon. They said Jean Dixon has said that children are being paired up on board these ships. It was like they were being paired for future partnering. So I'm going to try to find that. But anyway, and I never forgot that. I just went, what? Because everybody's laughing at it, but I went, that's real. That's what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she died in 97, so this was way back when. Okay, so
I remember my mother talking about her.
Positive. I have positive experiences with extraterrestrials. I have a love bite situation with myself, and those things are very positive for me.
Yes. I have never had a bad experience I can remember. Yes, I have never had a bad experience that I can remember.
Neither have I. Okay. So what else would you like to say? We're going to pass it to Richard.
I just want to say that if you're interested, my book is available on Amazon, or you can go to ufoteacher.com. It's called The Kings Are Coming.
Okay. The Kings Are Coming. Yes, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard, closing words and remarks.
I think that, as I said before, looking at the glass is half full. I know I said it earlier. Just keep in mind, the old guard is dying off, and they're going to scream the loudest and make the most noise, and they create the most chaos. But it's all a smokescreen. Don't buy into the chaos. There's a greater thing coming down the pike here. Maybe not in the next 24 hours, but it's coming.
There's something
and
this year, that's for sure.
We need to focus on that and work for it and get ready for it, because if we're not ready for it, it's going to catch us off guard. And that's not something that should happen to the human race. The human race is meant for greater things. So, yeah, we have a lot to look forward to as a people and as representatives of Mother Earth. And part of it's going to require going back to a Native American perspective and a matriarchal perspective to balance out the equation and get us back on track to our original Starborn legacy. So it's there for the taking. If you really want it, you just got to wake up, Linda said.
Excellent. So we have another show scheduled with the two of you on the 26th of January called Multi-Generational Encounters. I do have to move the 9th, the Invisible College, with the two of you in February, because I am going to be at the UFO Congress flying there.
Oh, okay.
That's where my flight is. So we'll reschedule that. And then we're also scheduled for February 23rd, the Real Manifesto. So the Invisible College, we definitely want to reschedule that, but we'll talk off air. I'm working with Gloria Hawker, whose name was evoked on this show. She's a wonderful person. I've had her on my network here, Aquarium Radio Network, a number of times. And she came over to Maui, and we visited in person, and we had lunch. So we're working on a conference in Albuquerque. And I think it's going to be probably somewhere around August, maybe September. And I'd love the two of you. I understand that you're working on something. Maybe we can co-create, or at least you can present and be on a panel or two or three or one, whatever works out. So we'll talk about that off air. Yeah, so we'll be we're doing everything we can because, there's a lot of wonderful conferences, and there's a lot of like the UFO rock stars, and us little people, we don't get to present that much, once in a while here and there. Yeah. So this will give us an opportunity to strut our stuff and fill in the gaps with these pieces of information that are part of the puzzle. We need to have all the pieces of the puzzle. And so we're going to do what we can to make this happen this year. And I think that's about all I want to say. So thank you very much for coming on today. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And we'll have this show on Spreaker, Blog Talk, and a bunch of other platforms, iTunes and YouTube, and there's some others I don't remember the name, but it goes to the show will go to about 10 platforms. So do tune in and listen to us and tell your friends. Okay, thank you, everybody.
I will.
Much love.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye then.
Aloha.